All right, we're back here with Coach's Corner, educational program design. And as always, I try to do kind of like these snippets because, well, first of all, like early next year, I'm going to do a semi-private personal training certification because it's going to have all types of program design, coaching, and everything in there. But, you know, going through everything in one go, as you may know, might take me a year, right? So it'll take a long time. I named this one Putting It All Together because I wanted to, again, whether you're an in-person coach or an online coach, you know, understand like what are the questions and the things that we need to go through when we create a program. I see this done wrong so often, right? Where it's kind of like you have an idea and then you create the program versus going through this. Like, what do we have to know, right? Because what do we have to know kind of gives us a template, right? And I've done previous videos where I talk about like, hey, if they're a 2 times a week client, we have AB, right? And it's going to be a full body program. If it's a 3 times a week client, it might be ABA, right? It might be ABC, so full body workouts. It might be lower upper full. And so you have your templates that you can fit in based on the person, based on what they want, based on what their lifestyle is, and so on and so forth. So what do we need to know? Well, we got to know their goals and priority. And by the way, like, look, there's a lot of this. I actually have a presentation coming up at an event in Vegas where I'll be talking about the hybrid athlete, which, you know, you've seen this a lot popping up, right? It's like, be a hybrid athlete, which means like, hey, be strong, but also be able to have endurance. To me, you know, hybrid athlete can mean a lot of stuff. Like, I'm a hybrid athlete, guess what? Like, I want to be strong, I want to be explosive and powerful, and I want to have good conditioning. But you're always going to give something up if you're going to the extremes, right? So if I was like, hey, I want to deadlift, you know, 700 pounds, but I also want to be the best, you know, triathlete, those are very competing demands. So the main goal kind of becomes like, what is your, if you had to pick 1 or like 2 goals, what would they be, right? So obviously if somebody goes like, put on 20 pounds of muscle, drop 20 pounds of fat, like those are very, very opposite. So being able to find out like, hey, what's the most important thing to you? What's your goals, right? Because then we can figure out like your GPS. And again, you know, transformation GPS, as I like to call it, is like, hey, you know, what's point A? What's point B? We'll come back to that. But my point B is going to be very clearly defining what their goals are going to be. Okay. From there is like days a week. What's realistic? How many days a week can they realistically train? I would much rather add days than subtract days, right? So I'm like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, how confident are you that you can do 4 days a week? You know, 2 strength, 2 conditioning, or 3 strength, 1 conditioning, whatever it may be, right? And if they're a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, I'm like, okay, cool, that's probably good. But I want to understand more about their life to be able to determine this stuff, right? So if I know of their goals and I know about their lifestyle and I know what they're really confident in being able to do, cool, that kind of takes us back to the template, right? Then time per workout, by the way, very important, right? Plenty. So I have some online coaching clients that basically are like, hey, two days a week, they can do a full-blown workout, which to me, they say it's a 75 minutes, right? 75 minutes or less. But 2 days a week, they got 30 minutes at home, right? So 2 is at the gym, 2 is at home. So I got to know that, right? Because if I start creating training sessions that are unrealistic, right? The person doesn't, and here's a great sign, right? If the person is not compliant, so if you are training and you're not consistently sticking to the outline program, that program is not a good fit because maybe you should have less days of training. Maybe the training session should be shorter, right? So time per workout is very, very important. Resources available. You know, do they have a full-blown gym? Do they have stuff at home? You know, plenty of people, like even myself, I find myself now where, you know, undisclosed information yet. Why? But there's training sessions that I have to do at home. So I'm doing like about 3 at the gym, you know, about 2 at home conditioning base. I got an adjustable set of dumbbells. I got kettlebells. I got bands. I got my own body weight, which is a machine. I can make pretty damn good programming, but I have to know what I have, right? I have to know what I have. I'm going to go back up here, training history, injury history. Plenty of people that come through and say, hey, like I'm a very experienced, you know, I've been training for 10 years. Like heard that I'm stuck a little bit. I need, you know, different programming. I need to break through my plateaus. I'll figure out their injury history. Or I might have a beginner, very different, very, very different, right? What exercise am I going to give them? Again, what is their competency in different skills? Can I give somebody a barbell clean? And like, yeah, I've been doing that for forever. Hey, I was an athlete. We used to do a lot of them. Okay, great. We can do that. Do you have any wrist restrictions, low back restrictions, knee restrictions, right? That's going to determine all of these things. I'm staying a lot, you know, here I'm staying a lot of time here because I think this is what gets skipped. And that too many, I would say, coaches write programs that are great to them, cool to them. It's kind of like a mirror of how they're doing things versus how others need to do it. Then we got preferences, okay? Big one. By the way, I would say, like, I used to think that the success of a program was the results, which, yes, they are. But how do I get results? I have to have consistency, right? Consistency in my eyes is what? Keep coming back, right? So is that person going to keep coming back? If they're online, are they going to keep doing the program, keep coming back to your programming? And if they're consistent over a long haul, they're definitely going to get better results than if they're inconsistent. So to not think about, preferences might be like, great example, online coaching client I have said, hey, 1 day a week, I want to do kettlebells. I love your kettlebell stuff. Watch the videos. I really want to do kettlebell stuff. And preferably it would also be implemented in conditioning. No problem. 2 days a week in the gym, 2 full body programs. One's more strength oriented, one's more dynamic effort. We have 1 full body strength session with the kettlebells, and they're sprinkled in with the conditioning as well. They're very happy. They've been doing it for a long time. They got really, really good results. Again, because I listen to preferences. So very, very, very important, right? Meaning if you have a questionnaire, if you're sitting down with the person in the gym, that should be something that comes up, okay? Metrics and data. So based on here, when I come back, right, and I go what their goals are. Well, what's important, right? Like, again, youth athlete. We have, probably can't see it to my right side, but we got Hawk and Dynamics force plates. We can measure force production. We can measure the vertical. We can measure the time on the ground if we do repeatability tests. We can measure rate of force development on a decel, right? We can find out data about like where they're at and compare it to athletes at their level, right? And if they're better or worse. And then we can say, hey, like to be elite at this, like we got to bring these numbers up, right? So that's data when they come in and say, hey, I want to be more explosive. I want to jump higher. Man, I want to have that quicker first step. We can measure it, right? That's our metrics. Now, if we want to, I'm going to come back to this later on. There's a whole like little section on the other side of the board. If it's body composition or health, right, we can also do blood work, right? See what's under the hood. Body fat percentage, lean muscle mass, bone density. We have an in-body we can do very frequently. We even have a DexaFit business here in the gym, right? Now, my point being is, what are the metrics that you need to look at? If somebody goes like, hey, my most important thing is I want to, get a chin up. I always thought that like a chin up was impossible to do. I believe I can do it now. Like, so I need somebody to help me to get the chin up. Okay, that's their big metric. Probably, getting leaner is going to help them get a chin up. Getting stronger is going to help them get a chin up. We want to be able to see metrics, right? Trap bar deadlift, 3RM, this, that, the other. So what's important? Like, let's find metrics to align with their goals. That's a very important factor. So, all of this, again, our goal is the GPS, right? If we know where they want to go, it's just a smoother ride, right? Like, you can ask the GPS and say, what's the fastest way to get to point B? And it'll tell you. What's the most scenic route? By the way, I actually like that question for clients as well, right? The fastest way may be training with me more often, maybe having a more dialed in nutrition plan, which they might not be ready for. So they might want to take a more scenic route to get to point B, okay? By the way, that's not wrong. That might actually be better. That might actually be faster, right? It sounds kind of weird, but if that person can stay consistent right here, if they can stay consistent, the scenic route might get them there where like, the fast route, they might quit and the tires blow out, take whatever analogy you want with the car. So remember, we talk about physiology and psychology, right? So there's psychological factors. They're going to help us determine that program. From there, this is just like, when we think about the goal, like, the goal and the outputs, this is like a great kind of like little continuum that I think Bill Hartman initially did, Mike Robertson, is we have the neural side of that's the neurometabolic continuum, right? On the neural side, it's speed, strength, power, right? It's fewer reps per set, right? 5 sets of 3 if we're doing strength or power stuff, for an example. There's less total volume. It's more intensive versus extensive, right? Shorter time and attention, but more force production, right? And faster force production. And then we have longer rest periods. If I do a heavy, yesterday I was doing trap bar deadlifts for doubles. I got up to like 485. And guess what? Like I need a long ass, after I did that, I did jumps. After that, I need a long ass break, right? Much longer than if I am on the metabolic side of the continuum, which is fat loss, muscle building. So there's more reps per set, right? 8, 10, 12, 15. Increased total volume. So even though the intensity, right, the load is lower, our volume is higher. There's increased time under tension, right? If I do a heavy double on a deadlift, my time under tension was probably a total of 6 seconds, right? I do a set of RDLs for 12 with a 3-second eccentric. I'm doing 45 seconds, 60 seconds of time under tension. And then shorter rest periods, right? So might be 60 to 90 seconds or even lower, right? If we're in kind of like a fat loss phase or whatever it may be. Whereas in like strength and power training, my rest might be 2-3 minutes. Stronger you get, maybe even longer. This is important because it's going to determine, again, if I get a client that's coming in and it's like, hey, I do want to build muscle and I want to get leaner, right? We're going to stay like, our first phases might be accumulation. We're going to stay kind of here, right? It doesn't mean, by the way, it doesn't mean that you can't have aspects of this, like in a training session. That's why we follow kind of R7. But like, it probably makes more sense to me here, right? So we want to think about that because it's going to make us choose. And then we look at that, we go like, well, what are the variables of program design? Well, exercise selection, right? Sets, reps. We talked about that because we're going to determine it from here, okay? Coaching cues. Ooh, that's a variable. Like think internal, external, right? Think like if I do a coaching cue, how to do something, it's going to change the exercise. Intensity, right? Intensity obviously can mean load, right? Percentage of max. Time and attention, tempo, rest periods, and breathing. Yes, breathing is a thing. So especially if we're trying to change movement. So take a regular row. So if I'm doing a regular cable row, right? I'm thinking about time under tension. I'm not cueing breathing at all, by the way, right? I'm just like, keep this control, pinkies in, squeeze the hell out of it. Versus I'm doing a thorax row. So I'm going to inhale. So on this part, inhale, and then I'm going to exhale. I'm doing a row again, but now I'm using breathing to drive air in and out of my thorax and get more movement variability, right? So I'm getting more air into that upper back. I have a different emphasis here, right? So that's going to change stuff. Like this is important because I don't think it's talked about enough. A lot of times when I post stuff on social media, and a person will be like, that's not the best way to do the exercise for muscle building. And it's like, well, who's saying that like muscle building is the primary focus of this exercise? Maybe it's power, maybe it's strength, maybe it's better movement. Could be, right? Like muscle building is not the only thing. So again, when we look at these variables, like it's important because look, I think I always say like, well, Mike Robertson said this and I loved it. It's kind of like my approach to it. We want to do two things. We want to address movement limitations and then we want to develop savagery. And savagery is going to be like, again, getting them stronger, getting more resilient, getting them, more muscular, getting them to be faster, whatever their goal is. But the thing is, we got to address movement limitations, right? And this is where kind of like, what can they train effectively? We're going to get to here in a second because when we build programs out, think about this, right? You get Susie Sue in and it's like, hey, Susie Sue wants to get stronger, but she wants to also get leaner. All right, so she's kind of this side of the continuum. So we're going to start off week one, maybe with 2 to 3 sets of 8 reps on a squat and some type of horizontal row. If we want to address movement limitations, she's got tight hips, ankles, core stability is not there. Are we going to give her a back squat? That's definitely not going to address movement limitations, right? It's probably going to put her in worse positions. But goblet squat might be a goal. By the way, she might be such a beginner that we're going to put her on a wedge, have her hold a TRX with a reach, right? So it takes her out of extension. She's got TRX. She's reaching with the TRX, got some support, and now she can stay upright with support, wedges up. And now, guess what? We addressed movement limitations, and 8 to 10 reps for Susie on that is going to be tough. She's here. Right? Metabolic end of the spectrum, right? And then she's going to do a TRX row. And that's going to be tough, right? Now, we get Joe, who used to be a D1 football player. So, yeah, he also, by the way, also has movement limitation. Been working behind the desk a lot. Hasn't really done stuff for a while. he wants to get some of his strength back. So we're gonna, he wants to be athletic again. So we're gonna dabble in strength, but he also needs a front load because a bar on his back is just gonna get him in a bad position. So we do a safety bar front squat because it feels comfy here. We're also gonna wedge him up. Load is in the front, bam, that looks pretty damn good. And we're doing sets of, 5 to 6 reps. Again, addressing movement limitations, developing savagery based on our goal. And we could have even the same template for that person, meaning a squat and a pull, right? But Joe and Susie are doing different things and maybe different parts of the continuum as well. And that's why I say, what's the best ability? It's availability, right? So when I look at, this is just one example of what can they train effectively. And I have this progression regression. So let's say for most people, goblet squat is almost everybody can do it. I mean, out of thousands of people that have come through Vigor Ground, I can tell you right now that 97%, 98% could go do a goblet squat right away. Maybe they'd have to, some coaching and wedges, and it looks pretty damn good, right? So if that's the baseline, well, regressions might be a plate squat, okay? So that's a plate squat is when I'm having, we can do plate squat 2 different ways. One is put a plate on top of my head. So hold it right above my head, 10 pound, 20 pound. Why would that help? Well, here's why. When people say when you're a baby, you could squat perfectly. Yeah, but put it this way, the baby's head compared to the body weighs quite a lot. Ours does not anymore. So if we put more weight on our head, it actually allows us to squat better. Okay, try it. Now we might have to do wedges, but that might be a regression. So we've done plate squats with people. They're here, cleans it up, right? Maybe it's a PVC iso squat. You've seen me do that in videos with Mike Robertson, right? We put a PVC pipe in a rig. I'm pushing into it. So it's getting my rib cage down and I'm going down and I might just do an isometric squat there. It's actually a good primer for a lot of squats as well. Then we have a suspension trainer, supported squat, right? So that's with the TRX, the one I was talking about. And then here we have a roller hack squat, okay? So imagine putting a foam roller on your back, walking yourself up, you're against the wall, and you're squatting down, right? Still a squat pattern. It's very knee friendly. But again, what do we pick? From there, if we want to make it harder, safety bar front squat. That's what I was saying that Joe was doing. From there, we have a regular front squat, then we have a safety bar back squat, then we have a back squat. And in between here, question mark. I got a whole bunch of devices, right? Pendulum, belt squat, hack squat. I love these machines. What's great about these is they're are they a progression or a regression? What it allows me to do, like a pendulum squat, I can get a beginner to safely squat. If my goal for them, or they have a goal of getting stronger or even building muscle, I can put them on there right away, right? And they can do sets of 8 with great form, protects the low back, works their legs. We can adjust it to where it doesn't hurt their knees if they have knee issues, right? It becomes available. So again, that may be a progression or regression, right? I know it gets kind of crazy, but the thing is you have to have your own. So your own continuum, because when you build templates, guess what I can do? Hey, this person wants to get stronger. What resources do they have available? Okay, well, they don't have a hack. They don't have a pendulum. They don't have this. Okay, cool. We're going to plug that in because that's going to be challenging on a sets 10 to 12 rep. Does it make sense to do a goblet squat for sets of 3? No, the limiting factor is going to be upper body, upper back, right? So is it a front squat? Is it a back squat? Is it a safety bar squat? Is it a hack squat? What's going to fit better? Very important. Again, we're trying to go over principles and zoom out so you can build programs that are better, faster, right? Better, faster, okay? Now, going back to this, how do you address limitations? I've talked about this before. We have these kind of 4 different things: position, pattern, load, and express, right? So if I can't get a good position for a person, and we're gonna stay with the squat, right? Meaning they're very arched, they're anteriorly shifted, right? So anything that I put on their back is just gonna put them in a worse position. So I probably need a front option. So that could be a Zercher, a sandbag, a goblet squat, a TRX, right? It could be a front bar, or it could be one of the machines, right? But if I can get them in a good position, then the pattern will look good. Our squat pattern, right? If it looks right, it flies right. Does the squat look good? Okay, it looks good. We can load it. Okay, so from there, we can load. And an expression is like, can we even do stuff like jumping with it? And this example would be like position. Sometimes we'll do things like resets to get a person in a better position. That might be positional stretch, or should I say positional breathing, right? Think like couch stretch with breathing, rib cage down, and they might get into a better position. But it may just have to be like, hey, we just give them a different exercise. I like this idea now of a lazy coach. It's hard for me to say, but lazy coach is this. Instead of coaching your face off with 15 cues and trying to fix something, why not give them an exercise that you don't have to coach as much? Because it's a better exercise to create a better position and pattern, right? So I just gave some examples here. Like for position, we might do some resets, pattern, the PVC pipe iso squat. Again, I'll put it in the comments so you can see it, right? And then we're going to load the squat and then a vertical jump, right? That's an expression of power with that pattern. Okay, so again, just remember, if it's not a good position, if it doesn't look line fly right, we can't usually have a good pattern and we can't load that pattern and express force, express speed, express those great things. Okay, so again, this is important because every single thing, like the difference, you can write programs 10 times faster when you got this dialed in. Now, I'm going to flip it on the other side because I want some examples here, right? First of all, these are simple constructs that are going to help you, right? Buckets of exercises. We got mains. So it's kind of like a main meal, right? We got our mains. Those drive outputs. Now, what those outputs are, so we're going to, I'm going to give you an example of my, athlete for life kind of baseline template, and we'll talk about this and give examples. But the main exercises, if my main for that day is going to be, a trap or a deadlift or a front squat or whatever it may be, right? We're going to drive outputs. That might be strength, it might be power, it might be speed strength, it might be whatever the goal is. Supplement is going to enhance and facilitate mains, right? So it's like, now again, for instance, in a fat loss program, these might be very different, right? So I might have a main might be a goblet squat, and a supplement for the main might be a hanging squat, TRX squat with reach and just tuning the lats down, right? Because they're so tight in the lats. And you're like, hold on. How does that make sense? Of course it does. This person wants to lose fat, like just build, I would say, better movement patterns, get stronger. So that's going to be a supplement to that main. Now, if I'm having somebody that wants to be more like stronger and increase their strength, main might be trap bar deadlift, supplemental might be a Bulgarian split squat, right? Similar movement pattern. And then we're going to kind of build that pattern up. Then third is going to be accessory. So that's structural balance, injury reduction, isolation exercises, right? So it might be like, hey, let's get the hamstring. Let's go back to the example. I'm going to give you both examples, right? The example of the person that wants to get stronger. It's a lower body day. They're going to do trap bar deadlift. They're going to do Bulgarian split squat. And then it's like, guess what? We need to bring the hamstrings up. So this might be a RDL or a single leg RDL because we want to bang out some asymmetries here, right? We want to do injury reduction. We might even do calf raises here because they got tight calves, weak Achilles, whatever else, and isolation exercises. We might finish off with knee extensions. Not a bad thing at all, right? And then core, right? Core, obviously, abs, which there's a time and a place where we can put that first, but we're not going to talk about it. Now, if we're talking about that fat loss client that had their mains is going to be like a goblet squat, right? Maybe that's going to go be superset with some type of row. And their supplemental might be like a filler. Again, we talked about that hanging TRX stretch where they're going to get that lats. And then their supplemental is going to be a lunge, like a static lunge with some type of push. Okay. And then their accessory, again, might be a hip thrust because we want to bring the glutes up, like band pull aparts for their upper back, right? Notice different goals, different rep ranges, like different outputs that we're chasing. Now, I personally like, so this is, I mentioned this in a separate video, but this is how I like to break down the template. This is, by the way, full body day, okay? Remember, templates, I have a lower, upper, full. We have a full, one that focuses more on strength, one more dynamic effort, one more on repetition effort. So there's many ways to do it, but I wanted to give you a baseline one, right? After you do your warm-ups, I like to do twitchy plyos. Twitchy plyos are everything from pogo jumps to foot fire. It could be accelerations, right? It could be twitchy skater jumps, but it's things that develop elasticity, right? Again, things that have a very short contact time. And for somebody that's a beginner, this might mean jump rope. This might be, again, foot fire. This might be, I'm throwing a deck of like cards because they're flying weird and they have to react to it. So there's a lot of buckets that can go into the twitching, but I like elasticity and reactivity here. From there, we're going to go to a main strength movement. Most of the time it'll be lower, but it can be upper as well, right? So if it's lower, again, let's go back to that trap bar. Power is going to be, again, something that develops power. That can be scoop tosses, box jumps. So let's call this a box jump. It could also be, again, if you progress it, it could be a hurdle jump. It could be a lot of different things, but something that produces power. Then we're going to go a supplement lower. Okay, so we had a trap bar. So we're going to go a Bulgarian here, right? Bulgarian split squat. Some type of variation, right? And then we're going to do a main upper. So if we're grabbing dumbbells here, if it's dumbbells, we probably want to do a push here, right? So there's going to be some type of dumbbell bench variation. Cool. Then we're going to do an accessory lower. All right, what do we need? We need some hamstring. So we might do a roller hamstring curls here. We could do some type of hip thrust, glute ham raise, just giving some examples, right? Accessory upper, so we got to push. We want some type of pull. So maybe we do an arsenal row or a one-arm cable row here. And then we're going to do ab rollouts. And then this will usually be, again, going back to the other side. Do I even have time? Right? But I might do conditioning here. Okay. And then the conditioning will depend on what the goal is. Again, we'll do a whole separate conditioning kind of video that I want to break down, like how you pick your conditioning and whatnot. Right. But again, like if we had 3 days like this, right, what would day 2 be? Well, day 2 might be some type of bench as the strength. Our power might be a med ball throw. Then we do a supplement upper, right? Might be a landmine press. We'd have a main lower. Well, that might be a front squat. And again, you could flip-flop these, right? And then we'd have accessory. Again, we might have a pike pull-up here for a pull. For a lower, we might do a side lunge. So we get some I would say, frontal plane movement. And core might be a farmer's walk. It might be hanging knee raises. Again, options are endless. But you can kind of see, I wanted to break it down in a template. If your goal when we're looking at output is get stronger and more athletic, like my Athlete for Life model, right, we go that route. Now, if we were going to go a fat loss template, I got whole videos with a whole kind of beginner to advanced fat loss templates on YouTube that you can check out. But I wanted you to see kind of like the main supplement accessory core broken down into my template, right? And then also you can break it down into different other templates. Now, to go back, like this is, for this specific video, I did want to touch on this because this was some stuff that, like, I believe, you've probably heard me say it in videos if you go years ago, I call it structural balance, right? Well, if you're pressing, you got to be pulling. And because, we live here, we have to do twice as much pulling. We have to do, I would say, twice as much or 3 times as much horizontal pulling than vertical pulling. Like you've probably heard that, right? Well, I don't believe that anymore necessarily, right? And I call that structural balance 2.0, right? Really, the things that I'm looking for is, are the ribs and pelvis stacked, right? So my pelvis and my ribs, are they stacked on top of each other? If I'm here, they're not, right? If I'm here, they're not. So I want to make sure that that's stacked. That's a good position. We talked about position. So that's structural balance. Where do they need to expand? Now, this is I've done full videos on compression and expansion, like Bill Hartman, Mike Robertson's model. But if I want somebody to, they cannot get air into their low back or upper back, I want to be able to make sure that we use exercises. For example, I'm going to give you one example, right? If I'm very extended in my low back and then here in my front, that person with a bar on their back is not going to move well because they can't get air into certain positions. So a front-loaded, somewhere where I can push them back, right? So if they're here, I want to push them back, which means I want to front load and get air into my upper back, right? So where do they need to expand? Where I can get air into, that's where I can expand. That's why the breathing part is important and the exercise choice is very important. From there, what holes do they have in their training? Like a lot of the people that come to me and I look at their programs, it's like heavily, we'll go back to the holes in the training, but like they're barely doing any single leg stuff. Everything's bilateral. There's no stance, like different stances, right? Everything's here, no staggered stance, no single leg work, no multi-plane movement, no alternating stuff going on. So what are their holes? Like there's weaknesses. I always like to say, there's the example of some NFL guys that I have, right? I'll ask them like, hey, show me your trap bar deadlift, right? They'll set up for a trap bar deadlift, right? And then I say, hey, show me your back squat, right? And it's like, it's the same thing. So they're really just hinging all the time. So if we go back to structural balance with that person and say, hey man, like you got to have this much hinge with this much squat, with that person might just squat. I might have them on a program where everything is a squat. And you might look at the program and go like, this is crazy. I'm like, no, we're just like balancing them out because they're doing so much of one thing that is overusing certain joints, certain muscles, right? So again, what holes do they have in their training? Do they need more offset work, right? We're all like rotated a little bit. Are we using implements to offset us to work internal rotation of the hip to get more rotation in our upper back, right? And the thing is, if we fix some of those holes, their performance goes up. They move better. They're feeling better, right? So, and this is the rule of the value of testing. Like, don't assume test movement, test outputs, test body composition, test look, test all of the different things depending on what they need, right? So going back to holes in the training and testing, where I want to connect the dots here, right? Is consider including more split stance exercises. I'm talking about like, look, I could be doing a split stance cable row. I could be doing a dumbbell row. I could be doing a split stance cable press. I could be doing thoracic rotations with a split stance, right? Single leg exercises. We're talking about lunge, supported, unsupported, all of it, right? To improve the stability of the foot, the hip, because remember, the foot drives the hip. Then reaching exercises. So we're talking about landmine presses, right? Push-ups with the reach, cable presses. This is people that have done for a long time, just a lot of like scap lock, bench press, their scaps don't move well, and then they start getting shoulder issues, neck issues, right? So that might be a huge benefit for them. Offset activities, right? Load in a rack position here, load here, load here. Do we want to get somebody's hip, right? If they're lunging and their hip always falls out, if I load this side heavy, it's going to shift my hip back. This offset activity is going to put me in a better position, right? So these are all things that we can do with training. We do it smart. Alternating motions, alternating dumbbell bench press, right? Seesaw presses, right? Thorax cable rows. I mean, there's so many different variations that we can do, but those might be the holes in training. And I've had power lifters that I've wrote programs for, when they looked at them at first, they're like, damn, like this looks very different from what I've been doing, and in the next 6 months, they break every PR that they had. They feel better. Their joints aren't beat up because we like just looked at the holes in their training. Okay. And the thing is, to go back to the value of testing, again, depending on what they want to do and achieve, range of motion. So there's plenty of people, including myself, I'm doing a lot of, I would say, loaded stretching right now, right? I want to test that. Is my range of motion getting better? I can do that with pictures. We have, I would say, the sliders that have the inches out there so that we know what our distance is. Force production. Now, force production can be a bunch of different things, right? Hey, am I lifting more weight? But I can test it on Hawkins Dynamics, right? I have output, meaning output is a thing that I put on the bar. I can measure the speed and velocity of the bar. So now I can look at the speed that I'm moving a certain weight with that will tell me the force production. So I might be moving the same weight, but I'm moving it faster. Oh, it's faster. Same thing with speed. I can use output VMT monitors. I can use Hawkins. I have speed traps, right? So 10-yard accelerations, 15-yard accelerations. Great thing to do with general population clients, by the way, too. They love that stuff. body composition, right? What is their body fat percentage, body comp pictures, how they're looking like, health. Again, their resting heart rate, their HRV, their 60-second recovery after a 1-minute conditioning test or a Cooper test. A Cooper test can give us a ton of information, right? We can look at blood work. So don't assume, let's see what the most important factors are, like we said on the other side, and then make sure that we're testing that every 8, 12, whatever amount of weeks that we want to, right? So this, again, I wanted to give some more, this is a little bit of a zoomed out with definitely some examples that allow, because you can now see how quickly could I build a program out for somebody that's a 2-time a week, 3-time a week. Again, there's no conditioning here, so the conditioning plugs in. I'm going to do that separately, see how it all connects the dots. But this should help you kind of understand, like, because the thing is, if you've ever heard that analogy, it was Abraham Lincoln said, right? Like, if I have 9 hours to cut down a tree, I'm spending 6 hours sharpening the axe. This is sharpening the axe. This is giving you the filters to be able to then create great programs quickly, but it's not because you didn't make them quickly because you're rushing it and like you're dumb. It's the exact opposite, actually. You're smart, you have a framework, you sharpen the axe, and now you can create awesome programs in a fast way. Okay, so again, hopefully this helps out. Let me know if you want to see more stuff like this. Again, I do them in pockets, so you can learn, apply, absorb, and then we do more of it. All right, so if you want to see more of this, let me know down below. Also, if you want, to get more information like this on program design, on becoming a better coach, on if you want to look, feel, perform more like an athlete without nagging aches and pains, make sure to subscribe for this channel because we got stuff dropping every week. See you next time.